Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. As people get signed in, we're going to get started because we like to keep things timely. We want to use your time well. Welcome to Giving Better Feedback to Trainers. Um, we're excited about this topic today because we're really talking about how to support trainers in our organizations and find better ways to make sure that we're being effective in all our instructor-led training, whether virtual or in person. My name is Tim Waxenfelter. I'm the co-founder of Endurance Learning. We are a full service training development and design company. We do all sorts of work to support organizations all around the country and the world to develop their training and roll it out to their organizations. We've been in business since 2015. So we've worked with a lot of different companies on a lot of different types of projects. Really proud of our work on custom training, train the trainer, instructor-led training. We have new courses launching all the time from our customers. And you can see a QR code on the screen right now. We would love it if you connect with us. I know that for many of you, Brian and I have reached out. Sometimes we can't find your LinkedIn. So if we haven't reached out to you, I would encourage you to connect with us. It just helps us continue to build a community and to better support you. Um, we, at the end of today's webinar, you'll see a thank you slide, and then we'll have a chance to do some free giveaways. So we have two different drawings. The first is on one of two books. Currently, Brian has two books. My co-founder, Instructional Design on a Shoestring and What's Your Formula? There'll be a drawing for one of those. We also have two courses that we offer that are self-paced courses, and we're excited that we can offer those as well. If you're interested in those for other purposes, rolling those out of your organization, just let us know. We also have quite a bit of other things that we do. I've talked about a little bit about what we do as a business. But similar to the kind of work that we do on these webinars, we have two major offerings. One is that we do anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 or 4 hour sessions, in person, virtual, on training topics. Some of them are similar to what we've delivered on webinars. Others are completely different. They're all very hands-on. You can see in that picture a lot of, people are never sitting still doing nothing, even if it's virtual. And so they're really wonderful sessions. We get nothing but positive feedback on them. If you're interested, reach out to us, let us know. There's a lot of topics on the website, but there are more that we offer. And you could think about it as sometimes people do them as lunch and learns. You can do a short session for an hour and a half where we deliver some content that's interactive, gives your team a chance to improve their skill sets. We also have a really wonderful train the trainer session that we can customize for your organization to really fit how your trainers deliver content. Again, we deliver that many times a year for many years, and it's really a phenomenal session. So please reach out, let us know if you're interested. So what we have coming for next month. So we haven't started today's webinar yet, but I would encourage you to sign up for next month's if you can. It's a really wonderful topic and with really wonderful resources. It's called They Know It, but Can They Teach It? And it's really about helping our subject matter experts be better trainers. And one of the tools that will be the focus of this is it is significantly updated from what we've been using in the past, and it's going to be really exciting. Right now, my colleague Rachel will post a link. I think we have a link to the poll that we have in LinkedIn to get your feedback and thoughts as we design that training session. We are working on that actively right now, and your feedback. We started this last month. It was really wonderful to get people's feedback in advance. Brian and I often ask questions on LinkedIn to get feedback and to help understand either in direct messages or in polls like this. Really wonderful. So if you want to shape what the webinar is like next month, I would encourage you to do that. Okay, that's enough for the announcements. It's time to introduce today's presenter. Many of you know him. He's my co-founder at Endurance Learning. He's been in the world of training and instructional design for over 25 years. Most of his career was spent in the nonprofit sector, helping organizations uh, structure their learning and development teams and build out better programs. We've together been doing this since 2015. As I mentioned in the giveaways, he's published two full-length books on instructional design and training strategy. One fun fact, I'm going to give you two fun facts about Brian today because I have a second one and I couldn't help but say it today. He knows more about American Girl dolls than you would expect, and he will be actively rooting for Paraguay and speaks, I believe, still a little bit of Guarani. So if anybody speaks Guarani, I would try to talk to him, but keep your phrases pretty simple. So now it is time for me to hand over the presentation to Brian Washburn.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. And it is World Cup Day. I saw that Samantha Burton is saying that Atlanta is ready for the World Cup. We in Seattle are ready for it as well. And so, one thing that I'm going to share with you as we get started is I'm going a little blind today. For whatever reason, I'm having some technical difficulties. I can't actually see what I look like, so I don't know if I'm centered on the screen. I don't know what you can see. So, bear with me with that. It's very weird to be able to deliver something where I can't actually see what I look like when I'm delivering it. I am ready for Paraguay against the US. Why Paraguay? I was a Peace Corps volunteer actually in Paraguay back in 98 to 2000. So, developed my love for all things Paraguay and Paraguayan football indeed. But I have some other shout outs to offer today as well, not just for the World Cup, but you know how you go to maybe a sporting event, maybe a baseball game or something, and there's groups from the community that go, and at some point on the scoreboard they recognize all the groups that are there. Well, we noticed that we have had some groups who have signed up for these webinars and are attending together as teams, and so I want to give a quick shout out before we get started. And so I'm going to give shout out to the folks from 7-Eleven who are joining us, the Greater Bergen Community Action, Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families, Banco Popular. This is a fun group because not only is the group from Banco Popular in Puerto Rico here with us, but they're also master trainers. They've gone through our master trainer, train the trainer program. And so if you happen to be with them in one of the small group settings today, definitely pick their brains. Also, the Florida Department of Children and Families, Prevent Child Abuse America, Equifax, Visa Wealth, and Learn Without Tears. And so we have some groups with us. I think that's really cool. If for those of you who are here and who have other folks that are in training at your organization, I definitely would recommend coming together as a group, and then afterwards you can debrief it. You can talk about what you might actually want to bring forward into your work as you pick up some of these concepts. Now, let's get into today's session, which is about giving feedback to trainers. And as I get started, I'm going to put up, actually, my colleague Tim will put up a poll here asking, have you ever watched Dancing with the Stars? So this is something that I'm curious about, and I'm going to actually make a point to this in just a few seconds. But we're just going to get started with, have you watched Dancing with the Stars? Because I need to know if the point that I'm going to make, if it will make sense. So it looks like a lot of people who are with us today have watched it. If you have not watched Dancing with the Stars, just real quick, the concept is it is a competition that is on ABC, and what happens is that there are celebrities who are paired up with professional dancers, and they go through a series of different dance styles. And after each pair has gone, so a celebrity and a professional dancer, after each pair is gone, then they get some feedback from judges, they get scores. America can also call in or text in and vote too. But one of the things that I find most interesting, we can go ahead and end that poll and share the results, Tim. One of the things that I find most interesting about Dancing with the Stars is when the judges are actually giving feedback. And so if you've ever watched this, there is a phenomenon where a judge will give feedback, and here we have one of the judges, Carrie Ann. And oftentimes this happens, especially when Carrie Ann is delivering the feedback, is that she'll deliver feedback, and some of it will be positive, some of it will be, these are some things that you could improve if you make it through to next week, and so you can do it better. And when any of the judges do that, they oftentimes get booed by the audience. And so I'm curious in the chat, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Why would an audience boo when a judge offers constructive feedback to a competitor? What do you think? Yeah, maybe when the audience is listening to the feedback, they don't necessarily agree with what the judge is saying. It's their perception. It wasn't The feedback wasn't necessarily delivered well. The audience doesn't agree with the feedback. It's perceived as criticism. That's one that I really want to kind of jump into, because feedback, especially when we're trying to help people improve their performance, we're trying to be constructive in what we're doing, can oftentimes be taken personal, can be taken as criticism, and depending on what your definition of criticism is, maybe it is criticism, right? But one of the things that I've found is that when these judges, I have a few hypotheses myself. One is it makes for good TV, right? So the villain versus we're cheering for our favorite celebrities, right? And so that's one of the dynamics that's at play. And I noticed this happens. I was just watching America's Got Talent the other night, and this happens on that show as well. Anytime that any type of feedback is given to say, "Hey, if you make it through the next round, we'd like to see more of this," and the audience starts to booing. The audience is rooting, I think, for everyone to do well. Audience members. Now, here's one of the things. And I see that, Julie's saying it's just entertainment, right? So I definitely think there's a component to that. One of the things that I think might be happening, though, is that audience members and viewers don't have the same background as the judges. And so when we're watching it and thinking, oh, that's pretty good, the judges are watching it from a very different experience background and technical background and expertise, right? And so one of the other things, and perhaps one of the most important things that we need to keep in mind, is that for on a show like Dancing with the Stars, America's Got Talent, sometimes when we're delivering feedback to trainers, there's no standard rubric that they're working from. So in this TV show, judges use their professional experience, but they're also picking out things they have a preference for. Like Carrie Ann really looks for lifts, and is it the right dance to have a lift in? So sometimes the judges just kind of go off their preferences as well. I like what Diana said. Judges on The Voice tend to use a more strengths-based approach. So it could be the delivery that people really are latching on to. But a lot of times when we're trying to give feedback to trainers to help them do what they're doing better, this is also how we observe, right? So we're observing, we're looking for things that we like or that we're familiar with, and we emphasize those things. And so the question is that fair? So today, we're going to focus on trying to find a more standardized way to observe trainers and offer feedback that comes in that really follows kind of two guidelines here. One is more consistent, right? So we're looking for the same thing. And the other is that we're not just looking for things that we ourselves are strong in or that we ourselves really like or we ourselves prefer to see. We're looking for feedback that's going to be grounded in evidence-based practices. So, when we talk about feedback and what makes for good feedback, my guess is we have 113 people attending right now. My guess is that we might have 113 different definitions for what good training delivery is. And so let's do some level setting. I have a QR code on the screen. If you don't have your phone with you, my colleague Rachel will put a link into the chat. Go to the survey. And this is a little bit different, so we're going outside of the Zoom platform in order to do this. We're going to use Menti, and we're going to try to create a word cloud here. So my question for you is, uh, using one word, what makes for good training delivery? Let's see, applicable. Let's see how many people might get the same words, and so we're gonna see. which words get bigger and bigger as we go. I probably shouldn't have put this on the screen so that you weren't having things that everybody else is saying in there. I'm seeing engaging. Engaging is one of those words all the time. People stop me and say, Brian, can you help me put this training together? Can you help me make it more engaging? Can you give me some activities? And engaging is definitely one of those things that's important. I love seeing this kind of form. So the idea of interactive, which aligns with engaging, relevant, I think is really important as well. Actionable, informative, making some sort of connection. All right. I see fun right there tiny, but it's in the middle, but it's there. All right. Engagement is also part of it. Keep those words coming in. I'm going to go back to the slides here. This will be an interesting one that I think I would be able to do a LinkedIn post about just kind of taking a look at this word cloud. So thank you. Keep continue to respond and make sure that your word comes in here because we want to make sure that that's seen in there as well. I'm going to go back to the slides here. And so when it comes to what makes for good training, I'm not going to limit myself just to one word. That's one of the advantages of being the presenter. I'm going to talk about four keys to good training here. And those four keys, or we can maybe label these as competencies, fall into these buckets, right? So subject matter expertise, physical presence, ownership, and results. I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit in more depth because as I was putting this evaluation form together, I wanted to make sure it wasn't just things that I have a preference for, but I wanted to see what the research out there said. And so there's some interesting research behind each of these things. Subject matter expertise is where we're going to start. When I was writing my first book, What's Your Formula? I wanted to put some information in there about subject matter expertise and kind of the continuum between subject matter expertise and your ability to facilitate using adult learning principles. And my hypothesis, my preference, the school of thought that I would always approach this with was that subject matter expertise is important, but making sure that we're integrating adult learning principles that we can facilitate is, I think it's more important. When I started to do some research, I was looking, and probably this isn't the best way to do it, but I was looking for research that could support that opinion. And I found that my opinion was wrong. According to things that people have studied, people much smarter than me have studied, they found that learners actually trust someone with subject matter expertise more than an ability to engage and facilitate. And this comes from a number of different studies, and there's a term for this. There's a term, the term that they use. I'm going to put an asterisk by this because I do have a few words to say about this, but let me get through what the research says first. The term for this is source credibility theory. And basically the way this goes is that learner confidence, initially at least, is governed by two things. It's governed by a trainer's expertise, and it's governed by the trainer's trustworthiness. And so when we think about entering a training environment and somebody starts to speak, we want them to be the expert. Yes, I want to be engaged, I want to participate, I want to do all these things, but we want that person to have expertise and we want to be able to trust what they're saying. We want them to be able to project confidence in what they're saying. So that subject matter expertise is extremely important. And this goes back to research that started in World War II, and actually goes back to research that started in World War II when a particular researcher named Carl Hovland was studying what works when it comes to propaganda and what's the best way to present it, right? So you present it with confidence, you say something enough, and people believe it. Now, after World War II, Carl teamed up with somebody else named Walter Weiss, and they actually did some more research around this. And their study was called "The Influence of Source Credibility on Communication and Effectiveness." And so really what that research boiled down to was subject matter expertise above all was one of the most important things that learners come into a room looking to soak up. The reason I put an asterisk here is because I don't want you all to go away thinking, all right, I'm throwing out adult learning principles. I just need to be an expert in order for people to really get what they need to out of the training, because that's not how it goes. Subject matter expertise is important for first impressions. Adult learning principles will eventually aid in the retention of information. So they are extremely important if you not just want people to be confident in your delivery, but you want them to be able to go out and actually use it afterwards. And so that's why you want to mix that in. And that's also why this evaluation form that I'm going to share with you isn't just one dimensional. It's not just subject matter expertise. We have to fit it together with three other competencies. The next one I'm going to talk about here is physical presence. And so with physical presence, this is a really important one to combine actually with the subject matter expertise because if an instructor has master level subject matter expertise, but zero stage presence, what that will lead to is, and this is a lesson from our primitive brain, how our brain is wired to work. If an instructor they're super smart, but they have zero stage presence, the brain flags this as low threat and low energy. And when we were evolving and trying to avoid things that were threats, that's what we paid attention to. When we were evolving, we wanted to really pay attention to things that had energy. And so when something that our brain flags as low threat and low energy, what that leads to is our mind being more likely to wander. Now, there's a bunch of studies around this, and one of the studies that I really wanted to take a look at or really wanted to highlight, this is one of the favorite studies that I looked at, was a study that they did actually in a K-12 classroom. And they used, I believe they're called EEG monitors. They're these big things they put on everybody's head. They put on students' heads, they put on teachers' heads. And they found that when the teacher was engaging through eye contact, through gestures, through posture, through movement, through physical proximity, the students and their teacher were literally on the same wavelength. And so when you talk about engagement in a training session, physical presence is extremely important. It's not just the subject matter expertise, but your stage presence, your vocal cues, all the things like that. The next piece that we're going to take a look at is ownership because a lot of times people talk about when I evaluate somebody or some of the emails that you were sending me in advance of the session when we asked what are some of the challenges that you face, a number of people said we have curriculum, we have a lot of trainers out there, we can't always monitor to see if they're staying if they have fidelity to the curriculum, right, if they're delivering the training program as it was intended to be delivered. And for a long, long time, the dominant school of thought was that strict fidelity to the curriculum was essential. As researchers started to take a look at this idea of what is the impact on making adjustments to the curriculum that are still faithful to the learning objectives, but allow the presenter to actually deliver it in a more authentic way, the idea of strict fidelity to the curriculum started to give way to a new concept called adaptive fidelity. So, adaptive fidelity is the idea that we're going to stay faithful to the learning outcomes, the learning objectives, the whole point and the idea behind the training program. We're going to use the same activities that we're supposed to be using, but we're going to put our own personal style and our own personal spin on this. We're going to bring in our own stories. We're going to bring in maybe something that's going to connect with this local audience a little bit better when it comes to an example that I'm going to give or a data point that I can offer. So the idea of adaptive fidelity is really important. And keep in mind that this is also really closely related to item number one, the subject matter expertise, because we can't really adapt. We can't tell the right stories that are aligned with the learning objectives unless we're confident in our mastery of the subject matter expertise. So ownership doesn't mean that we're going to toss out something and do our own thing. I'll give you an example. I was doing a train the trainer session. This is a few years ago now, and one of the presenters felt that he knew the topic so well that he didn't need to follow the materials that he had been given. Instead, he decided to give a lecture to the younger generation about how they needed to pay more attention to more experienced professionals so they could actually pick up some of the subject matter expertise. Had nothing to do with the curriculum. He wanted to own it, but there's no adaptive fidelity. There's no fidelity at all, right? So we don't want when we talk about ownership here, we're not talking about tossing out what's written so that we can give our own presentation. What we're talking about is being able to adapt what's written in order to be more authentic in the delivery. So strict adherence without any sort of personal or localized examples can lead to what's called superficial implementation, right? So we're so stiff. We're trying to really adhere to the materials as written, and so we start to read. And sometimes we just read, and there's no authenticity in that delivery, and that will impact a learner's ability to process what's being shared, as well as their confidence that this person actually knows what they're talking about. The last competency that I want to talk about here is results. Now, results, and this going back to that word cloud, that was something else that we were seeing. Can people actually use it? Is it relevant? And can people actually use what it is that they're being trained on? I took a look at a study that was put out in 2019 called Transfer of Training, a meta-analytic review of influences on post-training transfer. It's an academic study that took a look at dozens of studies over the years in terms of what actually works if we want to have people transfer what they learned in the training environment to out there. And I was really interested by the conclusions of this paper because this paper actually said practice is important, but the way that we practice is actually the most important thing. And how should we practice? Well, the answer was it depends. And it depends on two things, really. What the authors of this paper really said was that when it comes to practice, practice can be broken into two categories of training. One category is called closed. This is your technical training. So it could be highly process related, it could be computer training, things like that. And what they found when it comes to practice that leads to transfer out into the real world for closed or technical types of training was that they found that repetitive practice works really well. So let me learn the steps, let me do the steps again, maybe quiz me on the steps, whatever it might be. They found that that works really well because there's really, when it comes to technical types of training, there's really kind of one way there's a right and wrong way to do things. However, the second category that they broke things down to was what they titled open leadership development, communication, kind of the soft skills stuff that we talk about. And they found that quizzes, when it comes to testing whether or not people know something, they found that quizzes could be discussions that people are having. They found that those have limited impact when it comes to transfer of training. What they found most useful when it comes to whether or not somebody's going to transfer something out into the real world was offering dynamic scenarios where you have to take on unpredictable realities. So it could be something like a role play, it could be something like a branching scenario. Several of these topics we talked about in a webinar that we did a month or two ago. But when it comes to open, unpredictable types of things, we want people to transfer that out into the real world. We're talking about giving people dynamic opportunities to practice. Now, that is as much a design element as it is a delivery element, but it is something that we can actually observe when we're observing training. I always say that good design really helps to lead to better training delivery. So when that goes back to the fidelity to the curriculum, as well as the ownership, as well as the subject matter expertise, puts it all together. So we have all four of these categories, all four of these competencies put together into one document. Now, this is what the document looks like, and my colleague Rachel is going to put it into the chat.
Hey Brian, can I jump in with just there are a couple of questions that people
Yep.
wanted to go back to. So
Yeah, yeah.
one person asked about seeing the previous slide, I think the ownership slide.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but there's a couple of other really good questions. Um, Curious about how a study from the 50s applies to today with the influence of technology and shortened attention spans. Has that had an impact?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. The study from the 50s that so kind of World War II era study and then studies that after that about subject matter and that's specific to subject matter expertise, right? And so when we talk about attention spans and there's lots of debates about what that means in terms of learners having attention spans that are shorter because again, a lot of the studies around attention spans, you talk about people having and this is one of those myths that floats out there, right? So people today have a shorter attention span than goldfish. But with the shrinking attention span, there's lots of that's actually a pretty lively debated conversation because it's one thing about, yes, we have Reels and we have TikTok and we have all those things that really kind of impact, how much time people spend doing something, but they also will also sit down and watch a 2 hour movie. It's funny, over the weekend, I sat down, I was having Italian night with my son, and we decided to bake some lasagna, and then we watched The Godfather and my son didn't realize it was a 2.5 hour movie, but he's able to sit through it. He's able to pay attention to it. So when it comes to what people will pay attention to, and that's not necessarily part of that subject matter expertise study. The study for subject matter expertise is really around learner perception of the person who's in front of them who's presenting the information. So I would say that it seems like it is still relevant, and there are more recent studies. I just wanted to get back to that original one
Okay. And so
that
you can move on from this slide now. She said that's good. And then what do you think of physical presence or social presence when training in a virtual environment? How do we improve this?
ooh,
I know
that's
it's
a
a big
great.
question, so and I don't want
It,
to derail you too much, but I figure it's good to touch on that question.
Yeah. So, and my colleague Cassie Labori does a lot of work around virtual training and what's effective when it comes to virtual training and training delivery. And so, physical presence, we can still, even though we're virtual, we can still have some sort of stage presence, right? You can see I'm still using. I would do this if I was standing up. I'll do this. I use all sorts of body language and gestures to emphasize key points, right? So just because we're not there in person doesn't mean that we have to sit like this. And in fact, when it comes to the our posture, when it comes to the way that we project our voice, when it comes to the body language that we use, all of that can still make an impact even though we're delivering virtually. And so physical presence, we can't use proximity control. We can't use some of those other things that we might use in a physical classroom. But I think that the way that we show up to virtual sessions does make an impact on virtual sessions as well. I don't have research to kind of back that up. I just am going right now off of best practices, things that I've seen, things that I've seen other people do that seem to be really effective. All right, so let's get back to this idea of there's these four things because I want to have us explore these four concepts. And so I think that my colleague Rachel may have put this in the chat. Looks like there's been some other things in the chat since. But this is a document that we have been using at Endurance Learning for years and years. We created this with one client who said, our trainers they basically just respond that they tell the good stories and everybody gives them really high evaluations. So how can we actually give them feedback that what they're doing actually isn't a best practice? And so we came up with this idea that training is delivery is more than just one dimension. It has these four dimensions, and within each of these dimensions, within each of these competencies, there are some different categories. Now, if you wanted to make a more comprehensive, all-inclusive thing that every single training delivery needs to have, it's probably going to be a bigger document. We found this one to be helpful because it's targeted, it's short, it's reduced. When we were asking people, I asked several people to review this and give me some feedback. They mentioned some other categories they might include. The problem that I have with that when we include too many categories and I'm trying to use it to observe a trainer is it's overwhelming. So we tried to limit this to four competencies, eight different categories, and then within each of these categories, you can actually demonstrate behaviors that show that you're a developing facilitator, a proficient facilitator, or a master facilitator. And so this is something that if the Dancing with the Stars audience had this, maybe they could understand a little bit more where the judges are coming from because there are specific behaviors that they're looking to deliver. The other piece to this is, and you mentioned it when it comes to why people might boo during some of that feedback, is the way the feedback is delivered. Is it a strengths-based approach versus an approach that looks like it's being overly critical? And so, if I was to use this, what I would do is I would highlight or underline some of the behaviors that I'm seeing from the narrative in here. But I also, if I'm going to give somebody a one or a two or even a three, I need to have some specific observations. What am I seeing that is observable? So I don't want to write things like, it didn't look like you appreciated the question that came from the audience. What I would write is, when you got a question from the audience, your arms are folded the entire time. And so when it comes to observations, I'm looking for some things that could be describable, that can be observed, as opposed to some subjective comments in there. That's how I would use it. Now, we're gonna break you up into small groups and we're gonna actually have you just kind of explore this just for a few minutes. So we're gonna give you about 6 or 7 minutes in your small group to look over this form. What I want you to do when you're in your small group is to discuss how can this form help? Or maybe you're looking at it and you're like, this isn't helpful at all. So what's not helpful about it? When it comes to trainer evaluation and feedback. And then the last thing I'd love for you to do is decide which of these four competencies you feel is the most important. So my colleague Tim is gonna break you up into groups, and we're gonna put you into these small groups for about 6 or 7 minutes. Then we're gonna have you come back, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what you see. If you're not able to get into your small group, stick around. Once people are into their breakout rooms and we have a critical mass left here in this general room, I'll walk through these same questions with the people who are here. Like we have people joining the rooms. I'll give a few more moments for people to go ahead and get into the rooms, and then we'll start to have this conversation here as well.
And we know that there are some limitations on if you're accessing through the browser, if you're on a mobile device, sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes it's company protocols limit what you can install. That's why we do them in the main room here. So if you don't get into a room, that is totally fine. Or as Susan says, maybe you can't speak where you are right now. Um, but there's also chat when you're in the breakout room. So if you join the breakout room, you can chat to your colleagues there, to the other participants. They will sometimes people do that, and it's totally fine as well.
Looks like Kim didn't get a room, but hey, Kim, if you want to hang out with us, we're going to talk about this here. So, what I would let, and we can do this either in the chat or you can raise your hand and we'll take you off of mute. Hopefully, Tim, you can see who's raising their hand if they do so. And what I love to hear is how can this form, and I'm going to bring it back to the image of the form here. How can this form be helpful when you're trying to evaluate somebody's training delivery? I'm seeing some thoughts here in the chat. Tim, if you see anybody raise their hand, go ahead and feel free to take them off of mute. Scott says it limits the bias, and I think that's one of the things that this set out to do is to say, look, we're looking at these four things, these eight categories. This is what a one would be. This is what a two would be. This would be three would be. Don't blame me. I'm not the one who created it, right? It's just this. What you did was you delivered at a level one or a level two. So it does limit the bias and takes a little bit of the onus off of the person who's evaluating the objectivity, the consistency, not too many areas to review. So it's simple. Again, right, there's lots of things that we could be looking for, but we wanted to keep this targeted and relatively simple as well.
And we
Uh,
have Carla is going to join us here. Our friend Carla is going to come in with a question.
Excellent. This
Carla,
is
are you able to talk? You should be off mute.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. It's weird. I'm listening to you guys through my laptop, but I have to talk to you through my headphone. It's so bizarre. Um, I think I think for me, and I've done delivery, I've done instructional design, I've been doing this for decades. I feel super old now. But I think that for the group that I'm working with now, I think for them, it's just such a good place to start. We have a lot of trainers who got that position because they are SMEs and their understanding of adult learning just isn't super there. They're like, oh, no, no, let's just get this classroom stuff out of the way and then we'll get them out to the floor. And I'm like, no, guys, there's a reason. But having something like this really gives them a chance to go, okay, look, this is what I'm looking for. Other than me just telling you, like, I'm going to be looking at, that fidelity to the curriculum is something that we struggle with. I can't even get them to modify the activity because they think activities are dumb. That kind of, I'm like, no, guys, I need to know if it doesn't work because I need you to try it. So even knowing that, look, I'm looking for this kind of thing, and these are some of the reasons why, I think for us, it's just a great place to start. So,
Yeah, I love that. And especially with the ownership, right? There's personalization. So that's part of it. And then there's curriculum fidelity. So you do have to stick to it. We would we created a number of training programs for a manufacturing company, and then we would go out and have them do the train the trainer. And they would say, yeah, I don't like that activity. I'm going to skip it. I'm like, no, no, please do it at least twice so you can get a feel for the rhyme and reason for it before you make any modifications. And they used that as a rule of thumb and said, oh, that actually now I can see why we have this activity in here. So that's really helpful. We'll go to Linda really quick, and then we have to bring all the other groups back as well. But before Linda goes, just real quick, as you're taking a look at this, get in your mind if you had to choose one of these to be the most important, which one would you feel is the most important of these four different competencies? So get that in your mind. Linda, it looks like you're off of mute. Maybe. We're not hearing Linda, so um, we'll give you a few more moments, Linda, if you want to play around with your audio controls. Otherwise, I'm seeing people start to put some thoughts in terms of which of these they feel is most important. I don't know if we'll be able to have enough time to get into the why you feel that's most important, but I see that some people feel pretty strongly about their categories. They're putting it in all caps and with exclamation points, which is great. Tim, would you mind giving everybody kind of a 1 minute warning and we'll bring them back together?
Sure thing.
Uh, Oh, Linda, you're trying to unmute, which all sorts of the technical difficulty bug is biting. I'm glad it's not just
Oh, is
biting
this
me.
now? Can
There
you
we
hear me now?
go.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
I feel the self-awareness piece here with this kind of observation tool is really key for any kind of transformational change for a trainer. And I'm also considering if this was used as a peer feedback tool, we also know that peer feedback is so much more impactful than sort of the top-down power differential. So I do a lot of the ISW, FDW workshops, and peer feedback is just golden.
I love that observation, and why it's what you just mentioned is peer feedback can be really valuable because people buy into that more sometimes when they hear from their peers. And a lot of times when we don't have a form like this, but we open it to peer feedback, it's, oh, that was good because it's something that I really liked, right? And so this helps to keep peer feedback targeted as well. Scott, I see your hand up, but we were going to need to bring the everybody else back. So if we could close these breakout rooms. It looks like we have everybody back now. So I am curious. We're going to put up a poll here. Hopefully, you had a chance just to talk about this forum a little bit. We had a great conversation here in the general room. Somebody mentioned that this forum could be really helpful when it comes to peer feedback, as well as just a master trainer giving feedback. And one of the things that we'll do is it will help to keep everybody's peer feedback targeted in terms of these are the specific things we're looking for. Now, we're going to put up a poll here. I'm just kind of curious of these aspects, which do you feel is the most important? And this is kind of a funky poll because you get to force rank these in the order of importance. Rosario says she can't see the question. The question here is basically which of these is the most important? Which did you feel was the most important competency? Christina saying, "Well, let me submit." I apologize that the technical difficulty bug on today's webinar is not being kind to us. All right, let's. It looks like we got a number of people responding here, and this is pretty interesting. Like, we can go ahead and close this poll and share the results here. And this is interesting because what people are sharing is if you had to force rank these, right? So my question was which was the most important, but then the poll said, well, force rank these. And people are saying results is the most important. And I appreciate that. And then they're saying that subject matter expertise is next, then ownership and physical presence. Now, the kind of the trick behind that question that I was asking you is, if you have to decide which one is the most important, you kind of have to look through all four of these to try to figure out how do I evaluate? How do I make a value judgment on which one of these is most important? You have to look at all of them. So that's just kind of instructional technique there that I was using. And there really is, I haven't found any research that says there's any one of these that's more important than the others. It really is a jigsaw puzzle where you have to put them all together in terms of making sure that you are familiar with the subject matter, you have physical presence, the ownership, and the results are all kind of key there. So we're going to clear that poll. And what I'm going to have you do, the last thing we're going to do here, unfortunately, we're not going to have a lot of time to do this and have a conversation in small groups, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity to use this form and see it in action. So if you've had a chance to download this form, you have it handy here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a video where you're going to get a chance to observe a trainer. And the trainer in this video is going to be talking about the myths and misconceptions that are associated with visual design. So the objective, as you're watching, it's going to be about a 6-minute clip. The objective here is by the end of this segment, the learners will be able to identify the most important aspects of visual design to include in their slides and their handouts. Now, I will give you a spoiler. There's a spoiler alert that I need to give you. The sample trainer you're going to see is me. Don't let that stop you from being brutally honest when it comes to the feedback that you want to put in there. So I'm going to pull up this video here. We're going to put it on the screen. Hopefully I have settings where the volume will be heard. But take a look at this video and fill out that form as if you were going to give feedback to this trainer. Here we go. What I'm going to talk about is about 6 of the most important myths, or maybe most popular myths and misconceptions that are out there. One of them is the idea that the use of more color helps to break up content when we have a handout or when we have a slide. Now think about that. If I had a rainbow of colors when it comes to all of the stuff that I want to put into a handout or a slide, there's a few issues with that. One is, if we're going to print that stuff out, it could be pretty pricey, but beyond that, just the visual design of that, too many colors makes your eyes start to bounce off what you're taking a look at. So when it comes to colors, what we want to do is we want to find a good color palette with colors that complement one another, but beyond that, what we want to do is limit that to maybe 2 or 3 colors, unless there's a real good reason why we have some things that might be color-coded or other things like that. But playing around with fonts just to play around with font colors, playing around with the background colors just to play around with background colors, not a good idea. Another myth is the idea of the prioritizing space and trying to put as much stuff onto a slide or as much stuff into a handout as possible while sacrificing the idea of readability. When it comes to slides, slides are free. So if you want to put just a few words on a slide and have more slides, that's totally fine. It's a lot more easy to read something like that. When it comes to handouts, I don't know about you, myself, I'm pushing 50, and sometimes it's tough to read those smaller fonts. And so we need to make sure that we're being inclusive and making sure that everything that we produce is going to be accessible to people, even if they have some visual impairments. And so I think that one of the most important things here is to make sure that readability is prioritized over the quest to save on space, or to save the number of pages, or to save the number of slides. Another myth out there is the idea of white space being wasted space. When I was starting my career, I actually started as a marketing associate with a credit union consulting firm. I didn't know anything about marketing. And so I tried to jam lots of different things into these marketing materials, and somebody one time told me, white space, Brian, is your friend. And so that's something just to keep in mind. Sometimes when we have a little bit of white space and intentional about how we want to put the space on a page, it can make something a lot easier to read. Another myth, especially when it comes to PowerPoint design, but it also intersects with handouts, is that effective PowerPoint slides make for effective handouts. Keep in mind that PowerPoint and handouts are 2 different media. PowerPoints are there to help to supplement a presentation. So if you think of your presentation like a rock concert, you should think of yourself as that rock star. And when it comes to your slide deck, that should be your backup singers. Nobody goes to a rock concert to see the backup singers. The backup singers certainly augment and enhance that experience, but people will pay the big bucks to see you, right? They pay the big bucks to see the rock star. So PowerPoint slides really should be relatively minimalist. And then if people are asking, hey, can I have a copy of your slides? That may or may not be helpful unless you're intentional about creating a second deck that you can actually use for a handout. So you might want to create a second deck that includes the notes or includes some more information, because slides themselves really shouldn't have all of the information from your presentation there. Good handouts should stand alone is another thing that I hear oftentimes, and conveying all the information without additional explanation. The fact is, if your handouts can replace you, why don't you just PDF them and send them out and save everybody time and money on actually attending your session? So when it comes to handouts, what we want to do is we want to make sure that you have good information in there, but you also want to make sure that you're offering some information where people can take notes. You might even want to have spaces in those notes so that people will be able to really get the gist of what you're saying and take the bonus of being there in person with you. Finally, one of the last myths that I see is that people like they like serif fonts over sans serif fonts. So this is kind of a nerdy kind of publishing thing, but when you think of fonts, some fonts are clean and straight lines, other fonts have little embellishments and flourishes. So some fonts you'll see just a regular N. Some fonts have little curves at the bottom of it. The fonts that have the embellishments and curves and things like that, those are called serif fonts. Sans serif, sans without, are fonts that are a little bit cleaner. And those are actually more readable both in a digital format. A lot of times they're more readable as handouts as well. So when you take a look and think about some of these myths and misconceptions that are floating around out there, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you are using best practices when it comes to putting together handouts, visual aids, and PowerPoint slides. Woo! I told you to be brutally honest, and you indeed were. I'd love to hear, and just using the polling feature here, if you just want to give I don't know if we have a ton of time just to get your thoughts on how you rated me. So I'm going to just kind of skip over this last poll that I had. If you had a chance to take your notes in the form, I'm gonna share my notes and let's compare what we had here. So one of the ways that I would use this form is I would use it by either highlighting or underlining certain observations or certain behaviors that I saw. So with this one, I saw that extremely handsome presenter delivering the material seamlessly from memory with depth and authority. And I think that we saw some of those comments here too. There's a lot of subject matter expertise. There's a lot of lecture. 3. Answering questions, I would give that an NA because there were no questions that were asked. Now, I also have some observations here that I wrote. Delivery appeared fluent, as if this wasn't the first time you delivered this information. No questions were asked, although you didn't check to see if there were any questions, was an observation. Something else that I would do when it comes to physical presence, and people are saying, you don't look comfortable right there. That speaker remained anchored to a single spot. Their volume was okay. They were projecting, but they looked very uncomfortable just standing there the entire time. And so my observations were even. There's a question, what's the rating scale? Up at the top, you can see developing facilitators 1, proficient facilitators 2, master facilitators 3. And so with the final two pieces, I kind of highlighted again some of the behaviors that I'm seeing there. I gave kind of a 2 and a 2, and I gave some specifics that I observed. So I observed something about, I don't know about you, but I'm pushing 50, so those smaller fonts don't work for me, right? So some of these different examples were really helpful, and we'll give some specifics in terms of what worked there. And then finally, when it comes to results, and this is one of those things that most people said, this is the most important thing, offered no opportunities for participation. Didn't do any checking for understanding. It's not even a behavior that's there. I can't even fathom that nobody would check for understanding, which is why I didn't even put it, even for a number 1. So if I could give this speaker a 0, I might have given him a 0. And then I wrote some observations in here as well. I apologize that this was a little rushed towards the end. We didn't have a lot of time to talk this over and compare notes, but I see that in the chat there is a lot of comments about what you observed as well. But basically, that's kind of how I would use this form. It's there and you can kind of modify it to your needs, but it's there as something that's core that you can highlight or underline, and then you can actually offer your own observations as well. As we wrap up here, I just want to kind of share that some keys to effective and useful, actionable observation are twofold, really, right? So we need the criteria that's clear from the start, so we can avoid people booing us. I know that I saw Natalia was wondering if she could boo me. Yeah, we wanna have criteria that's clear from the start, and we also want to make sure that the criteria we use is consistent, and we use standard definitions. So that scoring system, the behaviors that are described there are really ways to make sure that we're keeping this all consistent. Real quick, I know that we have to mention this at the very beginning. If you did appreciate today's webinar, next month we're going to be talking about subject matter expertise. And specifically, what can we do that is the absolute minimum to help our subject matter experts be effective trainers? If you'd like to sign up for that, there's a QR code there. There's a link at the bottom. If you follow Endurance Learning, which you can do here, we'll promote it plenty of times on LinkedIn so you don't forget about it. We also did want to mention that if you find any of these topics to be helpful and you wanted to bring some of these topics custom to your organization, we're happy to do that. Also, obviously, train the trainer programs are what we specialize in, so please reach out to us. And with that said, thank you all.